My fiancé smiled as he handed me a glass of wine. "I have something I've been dying to tell you," he said, grinning so widely I immediately thought he'd gotten another promotion. I smiled back. "What is it?" He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You passed." I laughed. "Passed what?" His smile somehow got even bigger. "My family has been testing you." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He leaned back in his chair like he was about to reveal the punchline to the funniest joke ever. "For the past 11 months, my parents, my brother, and I have all been pretending that I was about to lose my job." He actually looked proud of himself. "They wanted to make sure you weren't with me for my money." For a few seconds, I honestly couldn't process what he'd just said. My brain refused to accept the words. He kept talking. "They're really happy. They all agree you're not a gold digger." I didn't hear another word, because suddenly every conversation I'd had over the last year replayed itself in my head. Every worried look, every awkward dinner, every reassuring hug, every sacrifice I'd made had all been part of their little experiment. And somehow, they expected me to be grateful. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. If your partner and their entire family secretly manipulated you for almost a year just to test your character, would you ever trust them again? Let me know what you'd do. Now, here's how this nightmare really began. I'm 24 years old. Until last week, I genuinely believed I'd found the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. We'd been together for almost 4 years. Our relationship wasn't dramatic. No constant fights, no jealousy, no breakups, no cheating. It was comfortable. The kind of relationship people envy because nothing exciting ever seems to happen. He worked in tech and made really good money. I worked an average office job. Our incomes weren't even close, but that had never mattered. We split expenses in ways that felt fair. Sometimes he'd pay more, sometimes I would. Neither of us kept score. I never asked him for expensive jewelry. I never hinted about designer bags. I wasn't interested in luxury vacations. Honestly, my favorite nights were when we'd order pizza, play video games until 2 in the morning, and argue over which superhero would actually survive a zombie apocalypse. We were both complete nerds. Comic conventions, board games, fantasy novels, sci-fi movies. That was our world. I loved him because I felt like I'd finally met someone who understood me. Money had never been part of the equation. If anything, I often forgot how much he earned. The person I fell in love with was the goofy guy who once spent 3 hours helping me build IKEA furniture because we both refused to read the instructions. He made me laugh. He listened. He remembered little things. When my mom passed away 2 years ago, he practically carried me through the worst months of my life. My father had been absent for years, so after losing my mom, I didn't really have much family left. That's probably why his family meant so much to me. From the very beginning, they welcomed me with open arms. His mother hugged me every time I visited. His father loved asking me about work. His older brother teased both of us like siblings do. Holiday dinners became traditions, birthday parties, weekend barbecues, game nights. Slowly, without realizing it, they became the family I'd always wished I had. Looking back now, that might have been the cruelest part of everything. Because they knew exactly how much they meant to me, and they still chose to lie. It all started about 11 months before our engagement. At first, it was so subtle I barely noticed. One Sunday afternoon, we were eating dinner at his parents' house when his mother casually sighed while clearing the plates. "I heard another tech company laid off hundreds of employees this week." Nobody responded. A few minutes later, his dad nodded thoughtfully. "That industry changes fast." My fiancé shrugged. "Yeah, happens." That was it. A completely ordinary conversation. Nothing strange, nothing alarming. A week later, his brother mentioned hearing rumors about budget cuts at several major companies. Again, no big deal. People talked about layoffs all the time, especially in tech. But then the comments kept coming. Always casual, always brief, always planted so naturally that they felt real. His mom would ask, "Has your company said anything?" His dad would joke, "Better update that resume." His brother would laugh, "Hope you're indispensable." My fiancé always smiled awkwardly before changing the subject. At first, I didn't think much about it. Then, I started noticing something else. He seemed different, quieter. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his laptop long after he'd finished working. Other nights, he'd sigh heavily without saying why. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, he'd smile. Just tired. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? One evening, I found him sitting alone on the balcony. He looked unusually serious. I wrapped a blanket around both of us. "You okay?" He hesitated. "I've just been thinking." "About what?" He looked down at his coffee. "Nothing." I didn't push. Everyone has stressful weeks. But deep inside, a tiny seed of worry had already been planted. And over the following months, that seed would quietly grow into something that completely changed my life. Over the next few weeks, those little comments became impossible to ignore. They weren't dramatic. No one ever sat me down and said, "He's going to lose his job." Instead, it was like death by 1,000 paper cuts. Every conversation included one tiny remark, just enough to keep the idea alive. One Friday evening, we were driving home after dinner with his parents when I glanced over at him. "You've been really quiet lately." He kept his eyes on the road. "I'm just thinking." "About work?" He hesitated. "Kind of." That single pause made my stomach tighten. He wasn't usually secretive. If he had a bad day, he'd tell me. If his boss annoyed him, I'd hear about it before we even got home. Now, it felt like he was carrying something he didn't want me to see. A few days later, his mother called me while I was grocery shopping. We'd become close enough that random phone calls weren't unusual. After chatting about recipes for a few minutes, she suddenly lowered her voice. "I probably shouldn't say anything." Immediately, my attention sharpened. "What is it?" She sighed. "I just worry about him." "So do I." "I've heard there could be more layoffs in tech." I stopped pushing my shopping cart. "Has he said something?" "No, sweetheart, but mothers notice things." She sounded genuinely concerned. "You know, if the worst happened, I hope you'd both remember that hard times don't last forever." I smiled weakly. "Of course. You two make such a lovely couple." "I know you'd stand by him." "I would." "I already know that," she said warmly. "I just wanted to hear you say it." At the time, that conversation made me love her even more. Looking back, it makes me sick, because every sentence had been calculated, every comforting smile, every reassuring word, every concerned expression. They were all watching me, judging me, scoring me, and I had absolutely no idea. As the weeks passed, I started preparing for something that hadn't even happened. I didn't tell him. I didn't want him to feel pressured. If he really was worried about his career, the last thing he needed was me panicking too. Instead, I quietly changed my own life. I canceled 3 streaming subscriptions. I stopped ordering takeout. The expensive coffee I'd buy before work every morning? Gone. I started making it at home. I skipped buying new clothes, ignored online sales, stopped eating lunch out with coworkers. When my best friend invited me on a weekend trip, I told her I couldn't afford it. That wasn't exactly true. I could have afforded it, but I wanted us to have savings, just in case. Every paycheck, I transferred a little more into our emergency fund. I even opened a spreadsheet calculating how long we could survive if his income disappeared completely. I researched cheaper apartments, smaller cars, health insurance options, second jobs, freelance work, anything that might help us stay afloat. Some nights, I'd lie awake running numbers in my head. If he lost his job, could my salary cover rent? For how long? Would we have to postpone the wedding? Would we lose the apartment? Should I start applying for higher-paying jobs now? The anxiety became exhausting, but I never blamed him. If anything, I felt sorry for him. One evening, I surprised him with his favorite homemade dinner. He looked exhausted when he walked through the front door. I kissed him. "Long day?" He smiled tiredly. "The longest." After dinner, I sat beside him on the couch. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If something happened with work," he immediately looked at me. "Would you tell me?" His expression softened. "Of course." I took his hand. "I don't care how much money you make. I never have. If things ever get bad, we'll figure it out. Together." For a second, his eyes looked strangely emotional, almost guilty. He wrapped his arms around me. "I don't deserve you." I laughed. "Good. Because you're stuck with me." He hugged me tighter. Now, when I remember that night, I wonder what he was actually thinking. Did he already know about the test? Had his parents already told him? Or was he simply keeping their secret? Either way, he let me believe every single word. Months passed. Life settled into a strange routine. The wedding planning continued, although more cautiously. I noticed he became increasingly hesitant whenever we discussed spending money. Instead of arguing for nicer venues or better catering, he'd gently suggest cheaper alternatives. "I think this one looks just as nice." "We don't need anything extravagant." I completely agreed. In fact, I became the one encouraging us to spend less. I even suggested cutting our honeymoon budget. There was a beautiful luxury resort in Hawaii I'd fallen in love with online. Crystal clear water, private beach, ocean view rooms. It was everything I'd imagined. But after thinking about our finances, I crossed it off our list. "It's too expensive," I told him. "We should save the money." He looked at me for a long moment before quietly nodding. "If that's what you want." "It is," I smiled. "We'll go somewhere fancy one day. When things are more stable." He kissed my forehead. "I love you." I smiled back. "I love you too." If someone had told me then that every sacrifice I'd been making, every budget spreadsheet, every sleepless night, every comforting word, was being observed like some twisted social experiment, I would have laughed in their face. Because nobody treats someone they love like that. At least, that's what I believed. Until the night everything came crashing down. The conversation that changed everything happened on a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work when I found him standing in the kitchen, staring into the refrigerator without really looking at anything. He didn't even notice me walk in. "You okay?" I asked, setting my bag down. He flinched slightly before forcing a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." I wrapped my arms around him from behind. "You've been doing a lot of that lately." He laughed quietly. "I know." I waited. Usually, he'd tell me what was bothering him. This time, nothing. Finally, he turned around. "If, hypothetically, something happened with work." I immediately interrupted. "Don't." "What?" "I don't care." He blinked. "I mean it. If you lost your job tomorrow, we'd figure it out." He searched my face like he was looking for some hidden motive. "What if it took months to find another one?" "Then we'd live differently." "What if we had to cancel the wedding?" "We'd cancel it." "What if we had to move?" "We'd move." He stared at me for several long seconds. "You'd really do that?" I laughed. "Why wouldn't I?" "You'd resent me." "No." "You'd be miserable." "I'd rather struggle with someone I love than live comfortably with someone I don't." For just a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something. His mouth even opened. Then he simply smiled. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." I kissed him. "You chose me." "That's enough." He hugged me tighter than usual. Looking back, that hug feels different now, almost like he was comforting himself. Christmas was only a few weeks away. His family invited us over almost every weekend. Normally, I loved those dinners. Now they felt different. Not because anything obvious had changed. Actually, that was the strange part. Everything looked completely normal. His dad still made terrible jokes. His mom still insisted everyone take leftovers home. His brother still teased us about finally getting married, but underneath it all, there was something I couldn't quite explain. Little comments, always about money, always casual. One night, while everyone was cleaning up after dinner, his father casually leaned against the kitchen counter. "So," he looked directly at me, "if he ever had to start over from scratch?" I looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You know, if he lost everything." I shrugged. "So what?" He smiled. "Interesting answer." I laughed. "What else am I supposed to say?" His mother jumped into the conversation. "I think what your father means is, some people aren't built for hard times." I frowned. "I think most people surprise themselves." She smiled warmly. "I hope you're right." At the time, it sounded philosophical. Now, I realized they were collecting data, watching every reaction, every answer, every facial expression, like scientists studying a lab rat. Around that time, I started worrying enough to make changes that even my coworkers noticed. One afternoon, my friend Sarah looked at my lunch. "Is that just peanut butter on toast?" I laughed awkwardly. "I've been trying to save money." "You?" She looked genuinely surprised. "Didn't you guys just get engaged?" "Yeah." "So shouldn't you be spending more?" "I'd rather save." She raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Just planning ahead." That wasn't a lie. I was planning, constantly. Every night before bed, I'd update our budget spreadsheet. I'd calculate worst-case scenarios. Could we survive 6 months? Maybe. A year? Probably not. I even started browsing online job boards after work. Not for him, for me. If I could earn more, maybe it would take some pressure off him. He never asked me to do any of this. I chose it. Because that's what partners do. Or at least, that's what I believed. One Saturday morning, I surprised him by canceling a shopping trip we'd planned for weeks. "What happened?" he asked. "I just don't think I need new clothes." "You've been talking about buying work clothes for months." "I know. So why not now?" I shrugged. "I'd rather save the money." He looked at me strangely. "You don't have to do that." "It's okay." "No." He actually sounded uncomfortable. "You deserve nice things too." I smiled. "I already have what I want." "What?" "You." He looked away almost immediately. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. At the time, I thought he was emotional. Now, I wonder if it was guilt. About 2 weeks later, we were invited to his parents' house for Sunday lunch again. Halfway through dessert, his mother brought up honeymoon planning. "So, have you two finally picked somewhere?" I smiled. "We have." "Oh?" "We decided against Hawaii." Her eyebrows lifted. "Really?" "It was beautiful, but it just seemed irresponsible." She exchanged a quick glance with her husband. It lasted less than a second. I barely noticed it then. Now, I can still picture it perfectly. His father nodded approvingly. "Very mature decision." His mother smiled proudly. "I'm impressed." I laughed. "It wasn't that hard." His brother chuckled. "I would have picked Hawaii." "So would I," my fiancé admitted. Then he looked at me. "But she's right. We should be sensible." His mother reached over and gently squeezed my hand. "I always knew you had a good head on your shoulders." For some reason, that compliment made me unusually happy. I'd lost my own family. Being accepted by his meant everything. I had no idea. I'd just earned another point in their little game. And only a few weeks later, they would finally tell me I'd won. A few days later, he came home carrying a bottle of wine. Not the cheap one we usually bought, one of the nicer bottles we'd been saving for a special occasion. He looked excited, almost nervous. "I have something to tell you," he said. I smiled. What happened? I wanted to wait until tonight. He set the wine on the counter and pulled 2 glasses from the cabinet. Sit down. Immediately, my mind started racing. Had he gotten promoted? Did the layoffs never happen? Was everything finally going back to normal? For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. Maybe we'd worried for nothing. Maybe tonight was the night he'd tell me his job was safe. He poured the wine, sat across from me, then reached across the table and took my hand. I've been keeping a secret. I laughed. You're scaring me. No, no, he smiled. It's good. Really good. I squeezed his hand. Okay. He inhaled deeply. My family says you've passed. I blinked. Passed? He nodded enthusiastically. The test. I frowned. What test? The gold digger test. Silence. I honestly thought he was joking. I even laughed. What? My parents have been testing you. What? They wanted to know if you were really marrying me because you loved me. My smile disappeared. I don't understand. He looked completely relaxed, like he expected me to laugh with him. You know all those conversations about layoffs? I stared at him. Yeah? They weren't real. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What do you mean, they weren't real? My job was never in danger. I just looked at him. He kept talking. My parents started worrying after everything that happened with my brother's divorce. I still couldn't speak. They thought maybe someone would only want me because I make good money. So, they decided to see what you'd do if you thought I was struggling financially. He smiled proudly. And you passed. I didn't react. He seemed confused by my silence. My parents were actually really impressed. My mom said most women would have left. My dad said you proved you have strong character. He actually laughed. They're so relieved. I felt like someone had knocked all the air out of my lungs. How long? He answered so casually. About 11 months. 11 months. Every single sacrifice, every spreadsheet, every canceled purchase, every sleepless night, every tear I'd cried worrying about our future. 11 months. Fake. I swallowed. So, the layoffs never happened. No. The financial stress? No. The conversations? He nodded. Planned. I stared at him. Your entire family? Yeah. My parents. My brother. And eventually me. The room suddenly felt much smaller. You knew? Not right away, he quickly added. They started it without telling me. I found out after a little while. And, he smiled awkwardly, I just wanted to see how you'd react. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You wanted to see? He nodded. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. It was just to make sure. Make sure of what? That you loved me. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because I genuinely didn't know how else to respond. You've got to be kidding. No. They're really happy. They said you've proven you're not with me for money. Then, as if he'd been saving the best surprise for last, he smiled. So? I upgraded our honeymoon. I frowned. What? The Hawaii resort. You remember? The expensive one you wanted. We're staying there now. I just stared at him. I booked it yesterday. My parents even helped me choose the suite. He looked so pleased with himself. I figured you deserved something special. Deserved. The word echoed inside my head, like I'd won a competition. like I'd earned a reward. My stomach turned. So, I said slowly, you lied to me for almost a year. It wasn't lying. It was just a test. You manipulated me. He frowned. I wouldn't say manipulated. You made me believe our future was falling apart. I thought I needed to help support us. I stopped buying things. I skipped vacations. I changed my entire lifestyle. I stayed awake worrying about rent. I cried because I thought you were scared. And all of you? I looked at him in disbelief. Were watching me? His smile finally faded. I think you're looking at this the wrong way. The wrong way? You proved you love me. You should feel good about that. I slowly stood up. I need some air. He looked confused. Why? Because at that exact moment, for the first time in almost 4 years, I looked at the man I loved, and I wasn't sure I knew him at all. The next morning, I woke up to 23 missed calls, not from Ethan, from his mother. I ignored every single one. Then my phone buzzed again. Margaret, please don't throw away 4 years over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That's what they were calling 11 months of calculated manipulation. I blocked her. 5 minutes later, Ethan texted, "Can we please talk? I finally understand why you're upset." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Did you understand after I explained it, or after you realized I might actually leave? He didn't answer. Instead, 20 minutes later, he showed up outside my apartment. Emily looked through the peephole. You want me to tell him you're not here? I nodded. She opened the door just enough to step outside. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I caught fragments. She just needs time. I made a mistake. Please tell her. Then Emily came back inside. He looks awful. I don't care. She studied me. You still love him. I looked away. That's the worst part. That evening, I finally decided I wanted one answer. Not from Ethan. From someone else. Someone who might know whether this was really a one-time lapse in judgment or a family pattern. I opened Instagram. There she was. Lauren. Ethan's older brother's ex-wife. The woman I'd met twice over the years. The woman his family constantly described as a manipulative gold digger. I clicked message, then froze. What do you even say? Hi, your former in-laws psychologically manipulated me for almost a year. Were they this awful to you too? It sounded insane. Eventually I typed, Hi Lauren, this is Ava, Ethan's fiancé. Well, maybe ex-fiancé. I know this is strange, but I think I owe you an apology. I'd really appreciate talking if you're comfortable, she replied, less than 3 minutes later. I was wondering how long it would take before they turned on you too. My stomach dropped. She'd been expecting this. We spoke the next afternoon over video call. She looked tired, not old, just emotionally exhausted. I always wondered when they'd do it again, she said quietly. Again? To the next woman. I felt sick. They tested you too? She laughed, not because it was funny, because she'd laughed about it enough times that it no longer hurt. They didn't test me. She paused. They investigated me. My heart sank. What do you mean? For months, they followed my social media, asked my coworkers questions, had family friends pretend to run into me. They wanted to know how much I spent, who I dated before my husband, whether I'd ever borrowed money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought your marriage ended because of money. Lauren shook her head. That's what they tell people. So, you weren't a gold digger? She actually smiled. I earned more than their son for 3 years. Silence. What? I was supporting him while he finished grad school. Everything Ethan's family had ever said suddenly felt fake. They rewrote history after the divorce. She nodded. They rewrite everyone's history. Then she asked me something that stopped me cold. Did Ethan tell you he didn't know about the test at first? Yes. She sighed. That's exactly what my ex-husband said too. You think Ethan's lying? I don't know. She leaned closer. But I know this family has one rule. What's that? She looked directly into the camera. If you don't stop them, you're helping them. Those words stayed with me long after the call ended, because whether Ethan had started the test or simply allowed it to continue, the result was exactly the same. He had watched me sacrifice nearly a year of my life and never once told me the truth. That night, Ethan sent another message. Can we meet? Please. I need to tell you everything. For the first time, I agreed, because there was one question I still needed answered. When did he really know? And I had a feeling the answer was going to change everything. I met Ethan the following evening at a quiet coffee shop halfway across town. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt. His engagement ring was gone, not because I'd asked for it back, because he'd taken it off himself. When I sat down, he didn't even try to smile. I deserve whatever you're about to say. I folded my hands. No. He looked confused. You deserve to answer one question. He nodded. When did you know? He looked down at the table. The truth. He swallowed. My parents started making comments before I knew. I stayed silent. I overheard my mom telling you that I might lose my job. So that part was true? Yes. And then? I confronted them. What did they say? They admitted they were testing you. I felt my chest tighten. And what did you do? He closed his eyes. Nothing. There it was, the answer I'd been expecting but still hoping wouldn't be true. I thought, he whispered. You thought what? I thought maybe they were right. I blinked. What? They kept telling me that love makes people blind. They said good people don't mind hardship. They said if you stayed after believing I'd lost everything, then I'd know you loved me. I stared at him. You believed them? I didn't know what to believe. So you watched me? He nodded. I watched you cancel your gym membership. I watched you stop ordering takeout. I watched you pick up overtime. Every sentence hurt more than the last. I watched you tell me we'd be okay. His voice cracked, and every day it became harder to tell you the truth. I couldn't even speak, because this wasn't just lying, it was observation. They had turned my love into an experiment. You know what the worst part is? I finally asked. He looked up. I was proud of us. He frowned. I thought we were building a future together. I thought every sacrifice I made was something we were doing as a team. Tears filled my eyes. But I was the only one living in reality. He reached across the table. I moved my hand away. I never stopped loving you, he whispered. I laughed bitterly. I know. His eyebrows lifted. I don't think you stopped loving me. I think you stopped respecting me. Silence, because he knew I was right. I talked to Lauren. The color drained from his face. You... what? I know about what your family did to her. He buried his face in his hands. I was afraid you'd contact her. Why? Because she's going to make my family sound like monsters. I leaned forward. Ethan. They are. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Then I asked him something he'd clearly never considered. If we had children, he looked at me. Would your parents test them too? His face changed instantly, almost like someone had slapped him. What? If our daughter brought home someone she loved, would your mother secretly investigate him? If our son got engaged, would you let your parents manipulate another woman for a year? He didn't answer, because for the first time, he was imagining himself becoming his father. I don't want that. His voice was barely audible. I know. I swear I don't. I know. I'll cut them off. I shook my head. No. I will. No. Ava, please. You don't get to cut them off because you're afraid of losing me. He stared at me. You have to cut them off because you finally understand they're wrong. His eyes filled with tears. I think. He stopped, then whispered, I think they've been controlling me my whole life. That sentence sounded painfully honest, and somehow it made me even sadder, because I believed him. We sat there for nearly an hour, talking, really talking, about his childhood, about how disagreement was treated like betrayal, about how every girlfriend his brother ever dated had been criticized, about how outsiders were always considered suspicious, how loyalty to the family mattered more than truth. It sounded less like a family and more like a cult. When we finally stood to leave, Ethan looked at me. So? Is this goodbye? I looked at the man I'd planned to marry, the man I'd imagined growing old with, the man who loved me, but still let his family destroy my trust. I wanted to forgive him more than anything, but love and trust aren't the same thing. I quietly removed the engagement ring from my pocket, placed it in his hand, closed his fingers around it. I'm choosing myself. For the first time in my life, I walked away from someone I loved because I loved myself more. And strangely, it didn't feel like losing everything. It felt like finally becoming free. For the next 2 weeks, I barely left my apartment. Not because I couldn't, because I was exhausted. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the realization that for almost a year, I had been unknowingly performing for an audience. Every dinner, every conversation, every sacrifice, every smile. Someone had been silently grading me. I kept replaying little moments I'd never questioned before. His mother insisting I should learn to stretch $1. His father casually mentioning that women leave when things get hard. His sister asking whether I'd still marry Ethan if he had to take a lower-paying job. I thought they were making conversation. Now I knew. Every single question had been part of the test. A week after Ethan moved out, there was a knock at my door. Not Ethan, his mother. I almost didn't answer. When I finally opened it, she looked nothing like the confident woman I'd known. She actually looked nervous. Can we talk? I don't think we have anything left to say. Please. Against my better judgment, I let her inside. She looked around my apartment before quietly saying, Ethan hasn't spoken to us. I didn't respond. He won't answer our calls. Still nothing. He says we destroyed his relationship. I finally looked at her. You did. She sighed dramatically. We were only trying to protect him. No, she frowned. You were trying to control him. That's not fair. It is. He could have been taken advantage of. I couldn't help but laugh. For 4 years. I paid my share. I bought him birthday gifts. I took care of him when he had the flu. I supported him emotionally. I offered to sign a prenup. So tell me, what exactly made me look like a gold digger? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because there wasn't an answer. Instead, she quietly said, You passed. Those 2 words made something inside me snap. No. I stood up. I survived. There's a difference. She stared at me. You don't get to manipulate someone for almost a year, then hand them a gold star. You don't get to reward honesty that you only discovered through deception. You don't get to hurt people, then call it love. For the first time, she had no response. I walked to the door and opened it. I genuinely hope Ethan finds happiness. I really do. But it won't be with me. She left without another word. 3 months later, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. I started therapy. I smiled sadly. A second message followed. I haven't spoken to my parents since you left. Then another, not because of you, because I finally see what they did to both of us. I read the messages several times. Then I replied, I'm proud of you. A few minutes later, he answered, Do you think someday we could try again? I stared at the screen for a long time. Finally, I typed the hardest sentence I'd written all year. I hope one day you become the man I thought I was marrying, but I can't stay long enough to find out. Then I wished him well and blocked his number. Not out of anger, out of peace. It's been almost a year now. I'm in therapy too. Turns out I had my own lessons to learn. I learned that being kind doesn't mean ignoring red flags, that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that love without trust isn't enough, and that walking away from someone you love can sometimes be the greatest act of self-respect you'll ever make. People still ask if I regret ending the engagement. I always give the same answer. I didn't lose a husband. I avoided becoming someone else's test for the rest of my life. And honestly, that's the best wedding gift I could have given myself. Before you go, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven Ethan after he admitted everything and started changing? Or would you have walked away the moment you found out about the secret test? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if you enjoy dramatic Reddit relationship stories with shocking twists and satisfying endings, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes, the biggest red flags don't appear until someone tells you, "Congratulations, you passed."